Over the weekend, the Supreme Court issued a ruling regarding the deportation of immigrants under an 18th century wartime law. This was in response to a case involving a group of Venezuelan immigrants in Texas. And to help us understand the situation just a little bit better, 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor is joining us now in studio. Whitney, good morning.
Good morning.
What exactly did the Supreme Court rule and why?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court this weekend on Saturday night essentially ruled that there could be no more deportations until further order of this court. And I think the court's concern was based on its previous order related to when migrants could be deported under the Aliens Enemies Act of 1789, which is really interesting. I mean, this is a wartime act that's only been implemented 3 times at the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. And we know World War II, it was essentially unconstitutional. So this is an act that's only supposed to come into place when we are at war, when Congress declares a war, or when there's an invasion. And that's really what the Trump administration is saying, is that, hey, these Venezuelans are creating an invasion, so we're implementing this rarely used law.
So something that's really under scrutiny right now is the timing of all of this. Is it unusual for the court to issue an order over the weekend?
Yes, it is unusual. It's not unusual for an emergency order, but here it was quite extreme. And the court really issued this ruling because on Friday, they had apparently loaded up some folks and they were ready to deport them. And that's when the ACLU filed this emergency order. So an emergency order can be implemented, but over the weekend it was surprising.
Okay, refresh my memory, because I thought the Supreme Court had already ruled on this issue.
That's a great point. And they had ruled on the issue earlier in April. I believe it was April 9th,
right,
where they actually gave President Trump a victory when they said, yes, he can deport, but it had to be in their language because they were getting these deportation papers in English and a lot of the folks didn't understand it. And they had to have advance notice and an opportunity to present their case, which makes sense because citizen or not a citizen, you still have due process rights. And so here what was happening was they weren't getting a hearing, they weren't getting a day in court, they weren't even understanding what was being alleged against them because it wasn't in their language.
Right.
So that was what the court issued, was that those 2 things had to take place. Well, cut to this Friday, those things didn't take place. There was no hearing, and these folks, I think over 100 folks were ready to be deported.
So then, for clarification, just because those things didn't happen, is that issue still standing, that the court ruled on?
Yes, that issue is still standing, where they have to give notice. And the ACLU is saying, hey, in World War II, we gave people 30 days advance notice, so they should get at least 30 days advance notice. But here, because that order was in place and it looked like the administration was putting these people, deporting them without that process, the Supreme Court, in very brief order, said no more deportations until you get an order from this court.
Now, another headline that came out of this, of course, was Justice Alito's dissent. What exactly stood out to you about this?
Justice Alito's dissent got a lot of attention, and it was actually, it was fairly eloquent, and he essentially highlighted the way in which the Supreme Court went about this. And he said, literally in the middle, and I'm quoting, in the middle of the night, the court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party, and within 8 hours of receiving the application. So he's saying, look, we didn't get an opportunity to fully flush this out, but that's not always unusual when you have these sort of emergency proceedings. So now both sides are going to be able to brief it and fully adjudicate.
Real fast, because we are well out of time,
yes.
But what happens if the Trump administration chooses to ignore court orders here?
That's the million-dollar question. That's the constitutional crisis that we're talking about, because we do have 3 co-equal branches of government. And the check and balance is that the court can determine if certain action is constitutional or not. If one branch, the executive, ignores it, then we are in real chaos there. And really the judiciary, I've said this many times, we have to really respect the judiciary because they are the arbiters of disputes. If we don't trust them, then there is no way to resolve our disputes. So I want to give the judiciary, Article 3, a lot of credence.
Okay, a lot to wade through right here.
Yeah.
Whitney, thank you.